Terrific. So all of our work, like I mentioned, we're very practically orientated. So I'm not going to give you an opinion of what I think you should do. I want to give you tools to do it. So we're giving people a tool belt and tools to put in their tool belt so they can determine for themselves, depending on where they're working, the teams are organizing, the companies they're investing in, to ask those right questions about if companies are structured for success in hybrid on a long-term basis. So our playbook is really important to us because it is that practical element. And Accenture describes a playbook as including those process workflows, standard operating procedures, and cultural values that shape a consistent response, which is the play. So it almost is like a bit of a sports analogy in the sense of we used to work in a very rigid system of work. There was one way to do it. We had structure, order, and routine that was fixed in cement. So for us, hybrid is also structure, order, and routine, but it's made of a bendable and breathable fabric. And that's where the kind of idea of flexibility is. We still need structure, we still need order, we still need routine. That's how people thrive, but it's just a little different. So we encourage people to look at their playbook as their iterative hybrid system that allows them to shift it over time in response to the changing nature of their business, of the markets, and the people they're hiring and what the people need. That's why we center all of our work centers around the playbook concept. So if you happen to have a copy of it, I would encourage you to open it now. If you don't, just drop some notes in along the way as well. So we've got 1 hour together today, and there's two things I want you to walk away from today. One is I want to empower you with a detailed understanding of what it takes to drive performance in hybrid. And the second thing is that I want you to learn the key concepts and those key strategies that we need to anticipate the needs of your hybrid workforce. So this is the real leadership angle, not necessarily what I'm doing today, but how do I anticipate the needs of my workforce leading into the future? And those are the two things that I want you to walk away from today understanding. So because it's a virtual session, we do a lot of things in person. These are a couple of ground rules. This is where I step in and get really bossy. So if you have a phone, just fire it to the other side of the room, anywhere outside of your reach. I'm talking to you, Link. I see you because you're right in front of me here. Any other devices, just shut them down away so you're not distracted. I've got 60 glorious minutes with you and I want to make sure this is good and productive. The other thing I ask is make no assumptions because all of our work is about busting myths and assumptions and replacing them with fact and data. So please be curious. If you hear something that sparks a curiosity, you're like, make a note or drop it in the chat and we'll talk about it at the end. And keep your camera on also if you can, if at all possible.
Can I make one exception? I'm going to put I need to get a PDF. So I'm going to be multitasking to get your PDF in here. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, you're on the exception list, Mark. You're good to go. So that's kind of why we actually, all of our work, we're kind of old school in some ways, even though we're futurists. We're thinking always about the future. We're old school in that we like people to write because we're always focused on developing the neurological link between writing something and committing that to your memory. So we're giving you, that's why we organize via a clear framework. So we ask you to write just a few things, but it's stuff that we believe that you need to know moving forward. So the first thing I want you to commit to your memory is the statement right here. The flexible work is about empowering people to choose where and when they work in a culture of trust. And hybrid, the word hybrid, is simply an umbrella term for a new work model that enables this. So we kind of really just start by leveling the playing field with getting to consensus on what we mean when we say flexible work. The first thing we start off with is actually a dynamite piece of research that Gartner put together at the beginning of the pandemic. And I really liked the way they portrayed this because they gave the characteristics of where we were, where we are, and where we're going. Because I think to really truly appreciate where we're moving in the future of work, we have to have an appreciation for how it differs from where we came. And sometimes just understanding those subtle differences allows us to really grasp what we mean by this. So in the traditional model of work, a 9 to 5, it was a uniform experience. There was a singular workplace, same walls, same chairs, same tables, same lunch options, same people. Now, when you have a whole workforce working in that singular environment, it holds so many variables constant, which means you can more easily see how people are performing in this. when you have one layer of experience. So here comes COVID out of left field in March of 2020. And we took everyone we knew and moved them home into their home offices or wherever they were, which meant we shifted millions of people into a completely unknown workplace experience. And I think that gave a lot of concern, understandably, for leaders. There was no longer a singular workplace experience. There was a completely unknown. They had no idea where their people were working from, how they were faring and how they were doing, or even setting them up. So we took our office first ways of working and we just kind of jammed them into a Zoom screen. And we had this forced feeling of uniformity. And we were no longer trusting people by seeing them around us. Now we were monitoring them digitally from a distance. So it was also kind of this really crazy, chaotic, unhealthy way, but a necessary way, because we had to keep the lights on. We had to keep moving through this unknown experience. So what I want you to know about this particular slide right here is that hybrid and flexible work is a distinctly different model of work. It's a different way of thinking about how we come together. It's a personalized version of work that runs on empathy-based trust. It's built around intentional collaboration, and it's a personal experience. So hybrid, as it's designed 2.0, what we call it, a distinctly different model from where we are right now. So the one thing I want to challenge you on here is to think that in the last 2 years, Mark, as you're describing, we know we hate commutes. Who wants to do that? It's exhausting. So there are things that we want to ditch about traditional, and there are things we learned for the last 2 years that we want to take with us. But I'll caution you to also think that there are habits we learned that we need to unlearn in this last 2 years. So hybrid is a distinctly different model of work, and all of the adaptive framework is going to help you illuminate the blind spots on what that is. Because a lot of resistance to hybrid isn't because people don't want it, it's because they're not sure. And they want to go back because they don't know what the forward looks like. And that's what I want to cover with you here in this presentation. So the first thing.
Wait, quick question. Can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
Because I love serendipity, and what can we still have that word serendipity in 2.0, like in enlightened intentional serendipity with collaboration? I think that's sorry, go ahead.
That's exactly what hybrid 2.0 does. Like in the old model, we were so fixated on the water cooler. Like, how do we get people to the water cooler? How do we place water coolers strategically and in a designed pattern so that people can step into serendipity? But hybrid 2.0 is not about getting to the water cooler. It's about what you bring to the water cooler. And I think that that's the major switch that we're making here. And the enlightenment component of it is giving people a different way to work, to be creative in different ways. So they will seek out. So it doesn't have to happen by chance. I think people will seek these out. They will seek these opportunities out. So that's more, in my mind, the intentional collaboration component. So less on luck and chance, and more like, ooh, I'm more balanced. I'm working in an easier way. I'm more eager to think creatively and share that.
Okay, keep going. I'll come back to that later.
Okay. The thing I want to mention is that it feels like a big leap, like jumping into hybrid 2.0 feels like this massive shift. And what our experiencing our perspective is that hybrid is just a little shift to the left, shift to the right. You know, we're not waking up in the morning. I'm not telling you, hey, the sky's green. You've always thought it was blue. It's not a monumental thing. And to further that, we've actually done this before. So in the 1930s, post-depression, Roosevelt was our president at the time. He appointed Frances Perkins to be labor secretary. She came in, completely upended the way that we worked. She wanted to modernize the flow of work and humanize it for industrial workers. So she crafted the social safety net, which are features that we still use today. A federal minimum wage, unemployment insurance, Social Security. She created that at that time to humanize and modernize the flow of work. But most notably, she created the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week, which was then established in the manufacturing system to humanize work. So we live in a 100-year-old workplace that we intentionally designed. And in my mind, we're just simply at bat again, and a game that we've played very, very well before. We know how to do this. We've done this before. So it's not unprecedented. It's just more recent. So here we are. Here's the adaptive framework. And I'm going to zip through these 6 components. And again, this is all the research we've done over the last 3 years, all of our observations pulled together around the person, which means you're not going to find any corporate lingo or corporate words here, because the future of work is not a corporate thing. From the point of view is we're moving towards human-centric design, focusing more on the person. So our whole framework flows around the person at the center of work. And those are the kind of the words that we use, and that's kind of how we come to it. So we're going to figure out how to structure, work, run, live, lead, and measure success in hybrid through the framework that we have here. The first part is structuring hybrid. And again, when we say hybrid, it's like you've thrown a grenade into a room. It is such a charged conversation. And I think that comes from a lot of people not having consensus on what these words mean. We don't really know what we mean. Like, what does remote mean? What does hybrid mean? What does flexible mean? What should we choose? In the world right now, working with a lot of different clients, people are making decisions and backing away. They're just not sure how to move forward. So to provide a layer of understanding, we created a model to explain what hybrid is. And we're going to define it in the form of 3 models. The first model is structured hybrid. And structured hybrid is based on a fixed location expectation. It's a fixed expectation that repeats. Now that could be on the left-hand side, a remote first or remote only team or company that has no location expectation. You're never required, except for in certain circumstances, to come together. That's one end of the spectrum. Up on the other end, we have in-person. That's like the model that Goldman and Netflix have chosen. Butts back in seat 5 days, that's our culture. That's a fixed location expectation. So if this was a bell curve, the 2 extremes on the other ends are probably about 10% each, but 80% of the world is moving towards the center. And they're making a decision between being a virtual first company or an in-person first company. Virtual first for us, the line we draw as those companies that choose to meet once a year, twice a year, once a quarter. Their default mode is virtual. However, a lot of companies are moving towards in-person first, and they're making a decision about meeting once a month, once a week, twice a week, every other week. There's a more frequent touch point in a physical location, so the default is in person. And most companies are moving towards in-person first. Startups tend to move more towards virtual first. The second model is unstructured hybrid, where there is no location repetition. There's no location expectation that repeats. That's an as-needed model. And that's, for example, is like what Twitter has enabled, or work from anywhere. You can choose to work from home, third space, in the office, as you wish. The principle on here is that people will self-select and self-organize to meet and find the people they need as they need them. The third model is blended hybrid, and that's where you have both a fixed location expectation and a variable within the same company. And that is most common for ultra large companies that have thousands of people that leave the decisions down to the actual divisions who know their people and workflow the best and allow them to make their own decisions as they go. So that's also a popular model for those large companies, those particular situations. The second thing about structuring hybrid to remember, and it goes back to the Gartner piece, is that we moved everyone to this remote setting. It was an unknown workplace experience. And this is something we focus on very heavily when we work with people. Leadership are not yet there. Go ahead, Mark.
It just dawns on me, maybe you're going to hit this, that we don't really, all this is assuming it's one company. But aren't we, there's so many interconnecting ways of partnering now. And I don't know if you're going to hit on that.
Do you mean from the point of view, like one company teaming with another?
Or just, yes, but that happening on a rather large scale. You team with these 10 groups that used to have functionality inside one organization.
Mm-hmm. And how do they stakeholder map to each other to understand where they are?
And some of them are in different environments that you're describing.
That's right. And we jump into that practically in one of our other kind of sessions, but one way we think about that is stakeholder mapping, which is teams that are making this shift, being as a team clear on who do I influence and who am I influenced by, where are they and how do I find them? So just asking yourself that question and organizing around that detail helps some level of clarity around what you just mentioned right there. So the second point in structuring hybrid is the unknown workplace. And like a lot of leaders don't really focus on this quite yet, but we think it's a huge emerging area of risk. From the point of view of it's such a different spectrum. Some people that are like younger kids live in apartments with multiple people who have nowhere to go. But then you had like myself and Mark who live in the suburbs in homes that have home offices. And we can't forget that that is the case for a lot of people because the home office environment has a huge impact on how people are able to work. You can't assume that somebody has a desk, all the actual equipment that they need, fresh air, light, good heating, a productive workspace. Now that raises a different kind of area of financial risk around, do I want to pay for that? But in our minds, it's a huge area of productivity risk if you don't pay attention to it. So we always ask people to look at this and be aware of what was happening on their teams. So the other component of a structuring hybrid is when we worked together in a physical location, we had really firm boundaries. So my commute was a boundary. Getting my coffee from the same person on the street was a habit. Closing my door at 9:15 was a routine. So in the absence of having those physical cues, the very subtle ones that told me I actually went to work, the question becomes, how do people know they're at work? And how do people know they've left? How do we establish those boundary habits and routines of the hybrid worker? And that's a personal thing that we have to kind of come up with ourselves or share best practices, but that's something else because together, the homework, the technical environment, boundaries, habits, and routines, that makes up the remote work experience, which has a huge impact on how people are productive in the long term and is something for leadership to be aware of. So the second part in the model is working in hybrid. So you can see now we've structured hybrid. Now we're figuring out how to work in hybrid. We're kind of building up on our ladder here. When we worked together in office, we thought like an office person. When we worked in forced remote, we thought like a forced remote person. The question is, how do we actually change our mindset to no longer think office first, but to think truly like a hybrid person? And to get there, there's 4 things we need to know, 4 concepts that we need to absorb into our DNA. The first is the concept of co-located work. That term means that we work together from the same physical space. The second term is remote work. That means we work together from 2 different physical spaces. Those are the 2 dimensions of location. Third term is synchronous work. That's when we work together at the same time on a project. The fourth and final term is asynchronous work. That's when we work together on a project, but at different times of the day or week. Those are the 2 dimensions of time. So those 4 together are actually literally the 4 cornerstones of moving into a hybrid worker mindset. And that right there is the new dimension of time and space. And then when we understand that, we immediately understand that maybe every piece of work doesn't have to be in an office, in an actual meeting. Maybe that could have been an email. And you see memes on that on TikTok, on YouTube all the time. Like, ooh, that meeting could have been an email. Because a lot of our work can be. We don't always have to, when the default assumption is not that we have to be together physically to trade information, that maybe I can send an email, which is remote and asynchronous. Wow. Now we've taken back some time. We found some balance and a different way to communicate that empowers people to choose when and where they work more comfortably. So once we have this new idea of time and space in hybrid, we can start thinking, wow, well, how do I actually implement that in my day-to-day work? Now we're getting real practical. How do I build this new way of thinking into my day-to-day workflow for me and my team? The first thing we show people how to do is to unbundle their role into tasks. And basically what that means is when you're hired for a job, you're hired to perform a role. And you perform your role by executing a series of tasks. Some of them are daily, some of them are monthly, but they're all tasks. So the first thing we do is encourage people to unbundle their role into the series of tasks they perform. This is kind of like step 1 of moving towards working in hybrid. We ask people to list out their main tasks they do. Then give an estimation for how much time do I spend on that? How much of my role is spent on this individual task? And then take the same task and turn it over and look at it from a different way. Is this thing more operational, like setting out a spreadsheet? Or is it more human in nature? I need to talk to somebody or communicate or collaborate with somebody on this task to get it done. We simply have them list that out. And now we're starting to look at our job in a different way. The next thing we do is say, great, now we've got it. We've understand those co-located, remote, sync, and async. I've now looked at my job totally differently as a collection of tasks. Now I can really start rearranging my time into a hybrid way of thinking via the 4-part hybrid grid. So we exercise and workshop this with people. We're like, okay, take your tasks and how would you assign them? What would you drop in here? What are those tasks you can do that are best done remote and async or best done sync and co-located? And right there, that really opens up people's minds to think differently. And when you do this with a team, your team starts thinking differently. We're like, whoa, okay, let's keep Friday's meeting free or call free. Let's make a decision about the tasks we're going to do when we're together in the office, because one of the things that's a big miss is if we are mandating people to come back 2 or 3 days and we don't give them instruction as a leader for what we're going to do when you do physically come together, that's a miss. So the 2 boxes that we encourage people to look at are the top right, remote and async. The more work we can push into that for ourselves and our teams, the more wins we get in hybrid. We get more time back. We become more productive. It allows us to be more creative and to be more innovative. That right there, the more we can get up in remote and async, the more we're moving into hybrid. And as a leader, when we co-locate and sync, which means when we do, like Mark, your wife's going to the office today, is she going to be working on some things together that she wouldn't necessarily be able to do well on her own? As a leader, if you think through that, then you're winning and you're actually eating in hybrid. And we organize people via their hybrid work week. And we encourage leaders to work with their teams to set literally a system. How do we organize our new flow of work? What's our location on any given day? Are there hours that we want to be open to others? Are there focus hours? We want to actually pens down, devices off. I want to focus on work 9 to 3 on a Thursday. That's my focus hours. And we, as a team, we decide that. What are the tasks we do that are sync and async on any given day? Even thinking and starting to talk like this with your team. Now you've moved on that over that bridge.
Uh-oh.
Do you have a question?
No, you used the word bridge and then you froze for 20 seconds.
So that bridge, so this organizational system allows us to build that bridge from hybrid 1.0 to 2.0, true hybrid. Simple. Now, we don't have to name something in here and keep it forever. This is designed to be a system and iterative and designed for people to manage this system, but it helps people get to consensus as a team and an organization, how we're going to operate together in hybrid. Third part of the framework is running hybrid. So now we've decided on a structure, or we're almost there. Then we figure out how to work together in hybrid. We have a new workflow, a new way of thinking about how we work together. The question is, then what's different about how we run this hybrid team versus how we run teams when we were physically together all the time? So a few things we want to show here. Your number one strategy is knowledge management and knowledge transfer. When I don't see you every day, I don't have an opportunity to bump into you and say, oh, hey, Mark, did you get the thing I sent you? Oh, or hey, Mark, did you hear what Link said in that meeting? If we don't have an opportunity to see each other physically, we're so used of working on that subconscious reaction. When we're invisible to each other, we have to be really clear about how we pass information to each other and where it's stored. So there are 2 things to think about. Knowledge management is about having a single source of accurate information for your team to access at any time. So it's a source. I know what Google Sheet to go to get the information I need because I know Mark's updated it on time. Knowledge transfer is how we share information amongst each other in a timely manner. If you're working with something, Mark, on a Monday and I don't know about it, I could be spinning my wheels all week. Have you given me the information I need on time? So again, we don't see each other. That can be a simple tool to use is by a team getting clear on their tech stack. It seems so obvious to list out the tools that you have, but it's not obvious to state and remove assumption about where work gets done. Not only does this help onboard new team members, but it helps to clarify where the work gets done. So there's no assumptions. We're working on facts. The other tool is a communication charter, and this is an awesome one that we use.
I think there should be a sway. Sway should be part of that tech stack. Why don't you?
Oh, we should be part of that tech stack. I'm going to update that. It's a good one.
Like years and years ago, you had the Franklin Planner physical, and then they tried to enter into the online teams, but I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, that we all have so many platforms, but there needs to be interconnectivity.
It needs to be connected. It needs to be simplified. Like the less tools you can use, the better, because the less guesswork you have, and you know where to go for things.
Simplification, especially with so many people jumping on board with this and learning how to do hybrid work. There's a channel for everything, and you can get really overwhelmed just by, say, Slack, just to simplify the process. And then have a list of directions on what people need to do to adhere by those kind of rules and standards.
And it's more overcomplicated because of what I said earlier. You're interacting with so many other individuals and organizations that have different types of structure and these tech stacks. So we're almost forced, and people want to communicate on Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp.
Right. So you're seeing how the wires can get so interwoven, and then you throw in all these new tools that are coming on the market right now that we're so eager to try because we have so much pain points because we can't simplify. So we try new tools to simplify. You can see how it's like a circular problem, but just like literally cutting that tech stack down and just being clear with people you're working with about what tools you're using, it just eliminates a lot of noise. But conversely, the other side of that then is your communication, and that really is more like protocols. So if I send an email out, we use Gmail as an example. We list them, Gmail. Why we use Gmail for async communication and coordination. That's the purpose. We use it for long form description with lots of details. And most importantly, the response time is about 24 hours. So if I send an email to my team, generally I'll expect a response within 24 hours. And we all know that, so there's no guesswork. But if I call somebody, something's on fire. Like there's a fire drill, hands on, roll up your sleeves, let's go. Because our team knows that we call each other when something's urgent. So you remove, again, I don't see these, we're a virtual first async by default company. I don't see my team physically that often. So it's really important that we know how to respond to each other when a message comes through a particular medium. And that's kind of how we develop a rhythm in a flow of work. And it's a simple tool any team can fill out and update and refresh. So we're doing some awesome work here. We've structured hybrid, developed workflows in hybrid, and organized ourselves. And now we know how to kind of show up. We are well on that way of building that bridge into hybrid. The next question is like, how do we live in hybrid? How do we as people and teammates show up to each other in this new way of work? Because everything fundamentally, structurally has really shifted, not changed. Same people, wearing the same clothes, working on the same things. So there's a lot of stuff that's the same, but we've shifted direction. So how do we show up differently? And the first thing we focus on with everyone is this concept of personal responsibility. A huge amount of power has shifted from a corporation's top-down structure to the individual people. Like, do I have the right boundaries at home? Am I set up productively? You can't know that because you can't step into my home and see. So if I'm working, I might literally, this is the question to ask any person on your team or org, are you opting in to flexible work with the willingness and preparedness for taking on the workplace responsibility that previously rested with the company? I think a lot of people are, but a lot of people haven't been asked this question. It's not yet aware that it is their personal sense of personal responsibility that's going to drive their organization to drive their personal performance in hybrid in ways that a company can't reach any longer because they're no longer in the workplace 5 days a week. That's a huge kind of like personal shift. So one thing that we focus on is what is that connective tissue then that binds those team members together. It's a really valuable exercise to consider your team's value statement, not the company. We know a company has a mission and they've got listed values and off they go. But your team, when you don't, what are the values that drive your team? How do we see each other? How do we understand each other? Like one for me could be accountability. Accountability could be a core value of mine. And if Link forgets to do something or doesn't send me the right information, I could be distrustful towards him. Now, he may not even know that because that may not be his core value. But when we ask each other these questions, simple conversation to have, you develop the connective tissue of high-performing hybrid teams at the team level. So what are your team's core values? When we run this in workshops, we get a different answer from every person. Some of it's honesty, some is trust, some is customer focus, sometimes it's loyalty, sometimes it's lightheartedness and laughter. But once we actually have that conversation, people see each other in the moment permanently in a very different and human way. And you can build on that and understand each other differently. That leads me to the next point that as leaders, the one thing to really chew on is that the leading success factor in any hybrid organization, it's empathy-based trust. It can't exist without it. And that's something new, this concept of empathy-based trust. So empathy and intelligence and emotion. Now we're getting to the softer side of things. We're not as technical and practical here, but this is what drives it. It is the ability to not make assumptions and to lead with kindness towards others. And the way I think about that is that we know that authentic trust, it is the oxygen in the air. And I'm very emphasizing this as leaders because you have to really grasp this. Authentic trust is the oxygen in the air of flexibility. It simply cannot exist without it. And this actually reminds me of something that Stephen Burke said to me very early on in the pandemic. When teams went home, he said to me, he's like, was that even trust that we had when we were together enough? Was that even trust? We were so challenged to trust people, we could no longer see them. So authentic trust is the oxygen in the air, flexibility. This is a model by Deloitte that we use in a lot of workshops that makes it very, very practical. Trust seems you can't go to the store and buy it off the shelf. You can't stock it in inventory and pass it out. It seems like an intangible, but this model is a way to build measurable, verifiable, trainable, coachable sense of trust. Deloitte gives 4 signals. Humanity is do your people and yourself lead with kindness towards others. Transparency is do your people and yourself provide information with the proper context so I know what to do with it and I know where I'm going with it. The third is capability. Do you and your people, are you skilled? Do you have the right skills you need to do your job well right now? And the fourth is reliability. Do you and your people show up where they need to be without being prompted? Those are the signals of trust. There are the hundreds of decisions we make every day and every week that build or erode trust on a team. And if you want to build it as a leader, you can actually use this tool to dissect problems that you have. Like where is the problem of trust on our team? Is it capability? Do I need to upskill? Is it reliability? Why aren't these people showing up where they need to be? Let's ask that pointed question. Then you actually build the verifiable, coachable, trainable, tangible signals of trust. And that's how we get to authentic trust. So now we're almost wrapping up. We're in leading and hybrid. So for all kinds of teams, we've structured it. We figured out how to work. We've got our style. We're walking across the bridge together into hybrid 2.0. The 2 last sections have more to do with leadership than the actual people themselves, leading in hybrid. What am I as a leader? What's different about leading a team in hybrid than when we're together in an office? How do I have to upskill or rethink this? So what are those hybrid leader, coach, and mentor strategies? A lot of it is we're no longer an office-based manager. It's no longer about coordination of task and work. We're automating all that. That no longer really is your role. So we're asking managers to shift their mindset to move away from that coordination role to being a leader, a coach, and a mentor for the future of work. For distributed teams, we don't see that often. And what are those things that we have to think about as leaders? The first thing we talk about is it's the only thing we talk about. And it's the concept of proximity bias. And that's new for a lot of people. A proximity bias is this kind of deeply rooted subconscious bias that I tend to favor and more easily build trust with those people I see more often than those I don't. And that's a very natural, tribal-based, that's how we survived for years. But this is what you're being asked to change as a leader, is to not show proximity bias. And how do we do that? We disrupt that by building a location inclusion mindset. That's in my words and in my actions, in the way that I sit across the table from somebody that's on Zoom versus in front of me. I always easily communicate and ask questions regardless of where you are. I pass information, promotions, it's all an equalized playing field. I am a location inclusion advocate where I am. So a lot of people think that hybrid will create an unequal playing field. I don't buy that, because for the playing field to be unequal through hybrid, that means, first of all, it had to have been equal before. And we know for many reasons, work has not been a playing field that's been equal for a lot of people for a long time. My take is that hybrid is the greatest equalizer that we have to level that playing field. But leaders, it rests on you. Hybrid will it'll make it or break it at the managerial line level, at the leadership line level, if we can combat proximity bias and be location inclusive. Now, again, remember, proximity bias is subconscious. Now that you're conscious of it, you'd have to choose to show proximity bias. And who's going to be that person in our world of work? So those are the strategies that we think about in terms of leadership, which is architecting moments. Remember back to the 4-part hybrid grid. If your team are coming to get together, whether it's once a week or once a year, and there's no organization around the things they're going to do the special, what are those moments I could architect that makes people want to come together and makes that time valuable? So if your team's core values are curiosity, maybe that's like maybe that's a learning event. And maybe you're bringing somebody in to talk to them about a subject. Maybe it's not even to do with work. Maybe it's something unrelated. But if the curiosity is a core value, that's a great idea to architect small moments. If your team are quite social, it should be a social event. So read your team and know who they are by understanding their values, and you can architect those special moments that make people want to come together instead of having to drag them together. Leading by outcomes is another strategy. When I don't physically see you, I can only lead by outcomes. It's way, way healthier, but you have to make sure your team are clear on their goals and how to achieve them and what success in there looks like. So we're leading strictly by outcomes. And the transparent leader goes back to the strategy about communication, how a leader becomes completely transparent by becoming a writer first, by sharing thoughts early and often with everyone around them, by complete transparency in how we lead. So wrapping up, we've now designed a hybrid work system that works for you. We figured out all those questions we need to ask, and then we've understood and we've leveled up our leadership. But in my mind, hybrid will not work unless we can prove it works. I love data, not exclusively. I don't rely on it for everything because there's data we don't measure that we have to give an account for as well. But part of our research into Sway, we measured and developed those 10 variables that drive performance in hybrid. And these are the 10 variables: optimism, inclusion, belonging, remote work experience, space and time, goals, boundaries, trust, transparency, and empathy. These are all interrelated, and we developed a data tool that allows us to measure how people feel about this, because that allows us to measure the correlation between a hybrid work environment that a company puts out there and its ability to allow their people to do their best work. So this is a real high, deep degree of insight into how people feel in their hybrid work environment, which ultimately can explain variation in performance over time. And allows us to really prove back to and understand what are the things we have to dial around or change in our hybrid work environment or keep. What are we doing really well? Do we want to exemplify, or where do we need to dial it around? That could be at the team level, the org level, the company level. But these are the variables that are going to drive or diminish performance in hybrid over the long term. And there's ways to measure for this.
So how do you measure it? Are you surveying, interviewing? How are you doing that?
We have a survey tool. So we designed 10 questions that give context around the questions. And we actually scored on a 1 to 10. So there's 10 questions, 10 points. So you can score this up as far as 100. And that allows us to almost like gamify and create a singular score for the effectiveness of a hybrid work environment. Also how a leader is leading in that environment. This also serves as great one-on-one questions and great way for a manager to have great conversations with their team on the things that matter. So with these variables, we use them in multiple formats to really drive conversation and gain insights for how people feel. And when you look at that over time, you can measure trends, compare to benchmarks. There's lots of ways you can use, but these are the 10 core things that are really going to make it. So that's a wrap. I will leave it there for now and ask any questions that we have. Answer any questions.
Jump on. I raised my hand. I don't know if that function's working or not, but I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
We were talking about, I think it was slide 22, the Deloitte model with the four prongs on that. I was given a task basically to kind of take over the leadership on this group, right? And of the group, like the members were already there, and then there's been some new members and whatnot. So some of the trust and all those pieces have been built along the way, as me is kind of coming in as a new leader. However, some of that trust and empathy is not there. What do you do in those circumstances to kind of change some of those bad behaviors or lack of trust or lack of empathy? Do you remove those people from the group as if like the bad apple spoils the bunch? Or, do you pull those people aside and then make them feel like they're targeted? How do you go about managing or handling a hybrid space where you don't have all four of that balance? You don't have all those, it doesn't meet all those quotas kind of sort of speak. And you need to fix it. How do you go about doing that?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is to remove the emotion from facts. So when somebody has broken your trust or they appear distrustful, you clearly feel disappointed because it's impacting you. So the first thing to do is strip away, if possible, the emotional component of it, your disappointment, put that to the side. And that model, a lot of our clients use that as a framework to diffuse situations because it allows you to name it. Like once you name something, it's very powerful because then you can have discussion around it. So did the trust come from a lack of respect from one person to another? That to me would be the humanity component. You're not leading with empathy and kindness towards others. And that's a decision, that's an instinct, and that is a personal behavior that can be encouraged once people know it's not there. Because then you can
You could freeze in a worse, like,
distrust.
you,
I thought it was me for a second.
you froze again, but actually you look good. When I freeze, I like that. Right. Repeat that, 20 seconds.
Good Zoom freeze face is all I can ever ask for on any given day.
Yeah, you got one actually.
So where did I freeze?
Can't remember the word, but maybe like 20
It
seconds.
was, it was about 10, 15 seconds before we jumped in. The last
So-
part of what you said.
To summarize that then, what I suggest is to strip off the emotion from the action.
Yep.
Look at those 4 signals of trust, determine which one it is. So now you're really narrowing down to what the problem is. And then once you name something, it becomes powerful because you name it and you say it out, then you can work on that. So is it lack of like humanity, like leading with empathy and kindness towards others? You can build that, you can build on that. But you got to take away the emotion first. And you got to drill down to those details and then treat it like any other task that you would work on. And that's a big leadership component because we are all trying to figure this world out. And there's going to be lots and lots of bumps. And it's not having a big thing about emotions is our emotional intelligence is not reacting to something, but responding. And you can only respond when you step back and look at it from a distance. Then you can make a decision how you respond to something with intelligence. And then you can make an impact.
Other questions?
Hi, Denise. I have a question. My name's Amy Erickson. My firm is called EK Equities, and I'm a banker and work closely with Mark and also Inessa. And I heard that you had a great time at the museum with Inessa. I saw some of those pictures. I thought this was great. First of all, thank you. Very informative and helpful and really actionable tools. My question is kind of surrounding like instant communication culture. Like I find that if it sometimes people like externally or internally or what have you will find this need to like respond immediately almost. And for me, like I would rather receive like and also remit maybe a thoughtful response. I just don't like have that need to respond urgently that second because I want to process a little bit. But I feel like with hybrid and with COVID and everything, that has really intensified. And I'm just wondering if you provide any guidance or structural advice around sort of this like instant communication culture and just what your thoughts are around that.
We are very afraid and we live in such a world of fear. And I think that this experience in COVID has illuminated how much of our world of work runs on fear.
Right.
That's literally FOMO, fear of missing out, fear of not being invited to a meeting, fear of not being included on an email, fear of not responding fast enough, fear, fear, fear. Why are we so afraid? Because you are so much better off being reflective and answering fewer emails with a thoughtful response than putting a lot of noise out there. So that is us. That goes back to personal responsibility. That's our decision to make. And it's also about setting up boundaries. Like boundaries are no longer only physical, they're digital and emotional boundaries in this new way of working. How do we set up those boundaries? Not a wall, but a boundary. Boundary is something different. And I keep going back to leaders because it has to come from leaders role modeling this behavior and standing up for their team with respect to other teams. So there's a lot riding right now on the ability for leaders to develop those strategies we mentioned. It comes to role model that is so powerful, but it has to come from us too. We have to live on less fear, have more faith in ourselves.
Yeah, I love that.
The challenge that I think is part, like I used to be a practicing lawyer and you got that client, right, who has a different expectation. Now you can divorce the client or you have a partner right? Like Amy and I'm up. It's not the normal hour. I'm either too early or too late. In Google, it's very much frowned upon. It's like you do not even email after 6 p.m., 6:30. You schedule the email to go out in the next morning or whatever.
Mhm.
And I used to always say, well, you're not in the real world, you're in the Google world. But
Mm.
there's something, I'm learning that's a very valuable, and I'm on both sides of the fence on this one, but I'm moving towards my wife and Google. But anyways, I'm still thinking through that point, because some people work at certain times of the day, and you've got to be respectful. But that instant thing, like if Amy saw me write something, I wouldn't necessarily want her to respond. So I don't know how you do that in emails. You can do that, schedule it. But other
Yeah, so one of the tasks that we run in some of our other playbooks is this task called the nature of your work. Now we talked today about unbundling your role, which is one way of taking the same thing and just looking at it from a different perspective. The other is understanding the nature of your work, meaning all of our work has equal value. It all plays a part, but our work is very different by the nature of it. Some of our work is strictly coordination. Some of our work is strictly collaboration. And a lot of it's solo work. It's the work I need to do on my own. So Leesman does a really great job of recording this information. And they believe hybrid is the best of both worlds. It allows people to find the right place and the right time to do the particular type of work. So if you are always on, you're doing a disservice to your own self and the other work that you have to do, and to your team. Because we live on this, earlier, I'm not saying this is your case, Mark, but we're so fearful of not being seen. We have to be seen digitally. We have to be seen all the time, but you're doing disservice. You can't run like that forever. That's an imploding system. So your work is best done in different locations at different times for different reasons.
That's your asynchronous in a way.
That's a part of it.
But people don't have to respond to it when.
I think that's the thing, Mark, too, is I do global work. And so at 2:00 in the morning, I'm getting emails from people in the UK and in Australia. There's no way for us to work 24 hours a day, but with the teams and stuff that I work with, they know when to get a hold of me because they know my time zone. And then it's funny that I'll get emails 24 hours a day all week, but I get nothing on the weekends. So I think there's at least that level of trust, with a professional, that people mostly don't work weekends. And if you do, then you have the knowledge that you guys are all working weekends as well. That's my thought on that.
On this point, East Tech, I asked you to come on video, but you see, there's a tool that we've been using with our Ukraine group, because we're all in different time zones, and that allows for people to chime in when they can. You want to maybe speak to that, East Tech?
I wish Marius was the one who was speaking about this, but regardless, it's an interesting tool. It's a little bit better to Zoom in the sense that we don't always have to be online at the same time, or rather all of us at the same time, but at the same time, there's a lot of catching up to do as well. I feel like, sometimes an email is just a lot faster than, going through a whole video conversation to get the nuggets out. Okay, so for example, the Sway strategy playbook. All right, if I miss this, I get that. Guess what? I get the almost the highlights of everything Denise is talking about. So yeah, it's there are pros and there are cons. All right, so let's see. That's my take on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Question here from Mike Daly at the end. I want to just address real quick. Michael's asking about, is this only for knowledge workers? And I think that it's most optimal for knowledge workers for obvious reasons, because once work moved to the cloud, it became location independent. And ever since then, we've been trying to force work to a location, but that's not the natural flow. But if the Future Forum does quarterly releases on really great data on measuring people's opinion towards hybrid, and the recent study was that 74% of people had a desire for location flexibility, but 95% had a desire for schedule flexibility. So the desire to be able to manage your time is far more important to people than desire to manage the location where work gets done. Because we're discovering life never has been 9 to 5. So why should our work be? There's an unnatural disconnect. So to answer Mike's question about, retail workers have to be on site. Sure, they have to be. They can only sell on site. But can their schedules be flexible to give them that high desire of flexibility around being able to shape their days and times? Their way to be flexible about that. And interestingly, there was a friend of mine that did a talk at Harvard's medical and dental group who had a work-life balance group that were speaking about the fact that female physicians, there's a higher percentage of female physicians coming into the world than there are male physicians. And females that eventually may become mothers have a desire for flexibility. So they have a huge leaky bucket in the physician world of people not having to drop out of the workforce because they can't attain that flexibility. And it's like about $900,000 indirect costs every time they lose a physician. So they have a huge leaky bucket. So when you look at that world where flexibility is a necessity, yet you think a surgeon has to be on site, we have to be creative about looking at our work in different ways to find different methods of flexibility, location or time for people. So it does apply across the board, but knowledge work is the easy first move.
Thank you, Denise. Yeah, for me, freedom and flexibility has been a key driver in my career now for a while. And when you were talking about old school 9 to 5, I don't think I had that job ever, although the closest thing was a union position that I left in 1980. So, yeah, thanks for your presentation. There were a lot of gold nuggets in there. And I think the one observation I made is if there's a tribal source to location-based work together, it's going to be challenging to get underneath or through or dissolve that which has taken generations to create. So 2-year pandemic isn't going to unplug us from the need to connect with each other in person, in my opinion.
Yeah, listen,
For
you and I
most of us, or half of us, maybe.
well, there's a work function and there's a desire to be together. So I'm not a remote first advocate, and I'm probably one of the few in my field that are not, because I believe in the need for people to be together at some points. There's an anthropological concept called embodied knowledge, which is the knowledge that happens and shares amongst people when they're physically together. And I think that's hugely, hugely important. And I think the office is hugely, hugely important. It's a physical manifestation of a company in a lot of cases. So I don't discard that. But the purpose of an office and coming together physically has completely changed. The value is there, but the purpose has changed. I think that the physical built space environment is beginning now to catch up to what that change is. And that change is people's individual connection to work. That's what's really, really changing at the root here. Work was something we used to just always do. There was one option or set of options, but we're now looking at it from a distance and hold on, I have a relationship with work. It's not who I am. It's something I do to discover who I am. And I think that has a lot to do with the mindset shifting around this desire for flexibility and experiences at work.
Is this part of the me, self-centered generation? It seems to me to be a kind of a natural progression of what's been occurring with each successive generation, say since the 70s.
I would challenge you on that because I don't see it that same way. One of the things that we kind of speak about is the multi-generational workplace. So when you have like Gen Zs, Gen Xers, millennials, and baby boomers all working together, Gen Zs are 25 and under right now. They are digitally native. They are more comfortable online than they are offline. And this cohort of workers, they've never been in an office. So they don't have those soft norms and standards that we traditionally grew up with. Those expectations you're not going to find in a company manual. So we've grown up very, very differently. And the pandemic last 2 years has proved that divide. So I wouldn't look at them as being me. I think they're just being what is work to me. And they're not the only one that are asking that. That's why the late millennials and Gen Xers and baby boomers to some extent are asking ourselves the same question. The desire for flexibility is not only a young person's issue, it's an every person issue. Because what's on the table right now is this sense of freedom. And my God, how delicious is it the freedom to be able to choose when and where I work so I can actually live a life that I want to live. That's a human issue. That's not a young person's issue. They might be more vocal about it, and they may be more willing to leave their jobs for it. They generally have less financial burdens than an older person who's married with children might have. So there's a divide between what holds us back and allows us to make these moves, but the desire is uniform across the board. So I don't see it like that as the young generation is me. I think just they're more honest.
Well, I think if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, we've gotten to a place where, self-fulfillment and higher order survival is no longer while people work, because these Gen Zs, survival's never been an issue.
Are you saying never been an issue because
they've grown up with plenty? They've never seen a crisis in their lifetime, other than, internal, or I mean, pandemic gave people a taste of something completely different than what they'd had before.
But I think that's what's really interesting is why we're looking at Gen Zs like they're like these aliens from another world. We're like, what are they saying? What are they doing? What do they want? People are fascinated by the Gen Z cohort. And I don't think they're fascinated. I think we're so interested in Gen Zs because I think we share a lot of the same desires for that sense of freedom that we've never really vocalized before, because we never really had an opportunity because those options weren't available to us then. And we've had more lived experiences that make us judge what's right and what's wrong. So there's a fascination, I think, on both sides of this coin here.
I agree. And I tend to go against the prevailing crowd. So when I look at Gen Z, I'm like, no, they're really more like us than anybody wants to admit.
They really want, sorry, Mark, one quick point on that is that they are very vocal about their needs for flexibility and autonomy and work that matters, but they're also really vocal that they need guidance and support and direction.
Right.
So well, this, like always, if I always say this should be a deep dive subject, it should be. But I asked Michael to come on screen because I think hybrid, when the one firm in 361 firm is Arthur Andersen, where I was a partner, and as was Michael Spett. And 1999, Michael, when we met, or was it 2000? It was 99. We had a global project at Arthur Andersen to restructure certain countries' telecom. There was a regulatory regime matched with a sector restructure. And we had a team, I want to say, that was led by someone in Thailand. We had a team in Australia, Brazil, Germany, where Michael was our domain experts. And we were asynchronously executing in 1999.
Yeah.
What's now happening, right? That sort of gave, in 2004, and I moved, I felt it was me, my dog, and a bench in Central Park. I was so happy. I was in New York City, and I was just searching for Wi-Fi. That was the key at the time. And you were part of these teams, and I really, and it's interesting. I just thought maybe Michael, you might reflect on that, like if you see it similarly, that the playbook's we're building on that kind of playbook.
I reflected on that point a couple of times in the last 3 years as I'm running a company which is based on the new generation. We have most of the people in the age between 25 to 35, and we have a lot of baby boomers, the most experienced people. Yeah, so I reflected everything what I did and what we learned in the past when we moved from a traditional company now to hybrid one model. And now we have established everything, with 400 people in 5 different countries worldwide. Yeah, so we have Japan, we have Taiwan, we have Ukraine, we have Germany, and we have the US. But the difference is, we are used to do that from our Auslanders' perspective. We are used to work in that environment. The younger people and people which are not have grown up in that one, they are not used to do that. They have different attitudes and they have different emphasis how to do that, and you have to train them. And we have also intercultural problems between European and US people. This is huge. Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah, you cannot share everything with one concept. Yeah, we launched everything with a hybrid model with 4 different kinds of roles. Yeah, so we have office roles, then we have the flex work roles with 2 or 3 days in the office. Then we have the mobile roles, which it's what we did in Anderson, working the whole time remote. And then we have teleworkers. These are the people having every time sitting on call centers. Yeah, this is splitting up a little bit the org chart from the top to the lower levels. Say, okay, you can choose. The problem would be, and this is exactly this is what you told us. It's exactly what we have to do. Look what we have to do to go to hybrid 2, to go to the next level, to create the organization. It's easy, but to get then the higher level. This is a challenge, and to bring this to the level that the different people understand what they have to do, and to get a real performing company. This is the next step.
That has a lot to do also why we designed the playbook to be very as practical as it is, because for us, it is an onboarding tool. It is about training people and getting them on board, and just being very explicit about what those expectations are. Now, those is designed to be, the playbook's designed to be your system. So we don't tell people what to do, and I wouldn't know what to tell you what to do. I don't know your workflow and your people, but I can tell you, I can illuminate the blind spots that you may have and provide a holistic approach, which then should be iterative over time and should respond to kind of like the pulse of the work that you do. But again, a lot of it goes back to, like I mentioned earlier, we're the same people, we're in the same clothes, doing the same things. There's a lot of there's a lot of things just the same, but there are subtle things that are changing. And naming it, that's really powerful. Naming it gives people then a jumping off point.
Yeah, for us, the main problems I see in that the different types of concepts is, especially in the US, people intended when COVID started to kick off to move from Chicago to other places. Yeah, so more or less all of our leaders has left Chicago and has gone to Austin or to Florida and get to much more nicer places than the Windy City. Yeah. And at the end, yeah, we have to decide how we do we establish leadership in the company. Yeah, and what we also see is that people need a little bit more of socializing, and establishing socializing on Zoom is missing a dimension. We don't have a dimension. I cannot get close to you. I cannot touch you. Yes, this is the real smell and everything what you have when you have someone sitting directly in front of you. So coming back to 2 days in the office, great. But if people have moved away, this is a challenge, because then you can establish this every quarter, but not every week. And this is also bringing people to a point, say, okay, is this what I like to do in the future time? Yeah. So we have compared our model with a lot of what we see from Google, Amazon, and others, yeah, which are more advanced on that one. But all of them, they have socializing problems, and there are people which has been moved to a decent city and said, okay, now I'm 200 kilometers far away. I'm missing my colleagues. I like to get in contact with them. And this is also a challenge, especially for the younger ones. My daughters are 23 and 21. They have not seen, as they told us, a crisis, and they are used to work on that. But they also need socializing. They need the direct contacts.
Well, and mentoring. It's not always easy to mentor by Zoom. That was Stephen Burke's point about culture as well. The value, so some of it's technical and some of it's cultural. But
and I would echo that, if I may. Denise, really good session. I was following in the background, but I did pay attention to it. So I had recently one of my friend's son who just came out from uni asking me to give him some mentoring, and he started working for KPMG, and he never been to the office, and he said it's very, very challenging for him, and he would actually like to go, and he would like to spend time with people, etc. So I guess like in everything else, different people have different needs. So hybrid is important, and therefore flexibility is number one. And always been. I've been leading global teams all my life, and I've been running through different time zones all the time, and it was already for many people something like hybrid anyway, and it works. But fully remotely, for some people it does work, but still they have to come and show face, and they do lack some interaction, and they feel it, they see it, especially now after COVID. After speaking with many people who spent 2 years in their homes and just becoming tired. So they are looking forward to more like, sometimes business happen next to the coffee machine as well.
Mhm.
And this is something that is lacking when you're working remotely fully. So, but yeah, again, some people who, especially introverts, they are embracing this, and it's good for them. I personally like both. I do need my time off from everyone else, but also the other side. So yeah.